So I'll believe it when I see it. You've said that before, haven't you? And really, is there a more skeptical statement that you can make? Now, whenever you say, I believe it when I actually see it, what you're really saying, let's just be real, is, yeah, I doubt that's ever gonna happen. Like I said, this is not gonna happen. And you've said it before, maybe it was something like this. You know that guy who always wants to borrow $20? Like, you know that guy, right? And when he says borrow, he really means donate. Like, you know, there's no chance you're getting your 20 back, but he keeps insisting, no. This time, like, I'm gonna pay you back. But you're thinking, I'll believe it when I see it. Or you've heard all the hype. You've heard all the hype. You looked at the trades. You're listening to all the talking heads. You hear all the fans saying that this is the year the Broncos are gonna win the Super Bowl. Hey, just to be clear, I'm not making a prophecy there, okay? But what you're really thinking in the back of your head is, okay, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. Or maybe you're going out to dinner with some friends and you're going to a restaurant that you really looked forward to checking out. So you make reservations at 7 o'clock and you don't want to be late because you don't want to lose your table or you don't want to make other people wait. So you decide, okay, here's the exact time that we need to leave. And if we leave at this time, that'll give us enough margin to get there and we'll probably be there just a little bit early. Guys, you know what I'm talking about, right? You plan exactly what time you need to leave. Here's the route that we're gonna take so we can avoid traffic and we can avoid way too many people driving slow in the left lane. And if we leave at this particular time, we're gonna get there, it's gonna be awesome, we'll have margin. But then you remember the one wild card variable in this punctuality equation. Your wife. Because maybe I don't know, maybe this is just my house. Maybe she doesn't share the same convictions and passions that you do about punctuality and how important it is and everything that goes into making sure that happens. So you graciously share the importance of what time you need to leave by so that she can plan accordingly. But then she says to you, oh honey, don't worry, we'll leave on time. But you're thinking, I'll believe that when I see it, right? You've said it, you've thought it before. I don't know what it is with you, and you probably have good reason to say that, right? Like whatever it is that you're doubtful about or you're skeptical of, like maybe you have a really good reason for it because either maybe the thing that you're skeptical of, you've never seen something like that happen and it goes against conventional logic or wisdom, or maybe you've been let down in the past, so your doubt is based on experience. Like those things are completely understandable. There's so many reasons that make a lot of sense. The emphasis that we put on things is proof. Like if I'm gonna believe something, if I'm gonna believe that it can actually happen, if I'm gonna believe in it, if I'm gonna believe that it's real, I need proof. Like we love proof, right? And we think that proof is the starting point for belief. But what if it actually works the opposite ways with some things? Like what if proof is not the starting point for belief? And what I mean is, some things have to be believed before they can be seen. Where belief is actually the starting point and not seeing and not proof. And maybe that sounds a little bit weird or maybe even counterintuitive to you, but there are some things that you need to believe and that will actually give you the ability to see. It'll actually bring the proof because some things, belief comes before you can actually see. That's exactly where we're at today. Today's the last part of season 2 in this series in John. We'll start season 3 at the beginning of next year. And really where we're at today is the last spot where Jesus is going to preach publicly. Like from here on out, Jesus is gonna be in private settings before the cross and after the resurrection. He's definitely gonna teach there for sure, but this is the last time that he's really gonna publicly preach to crowds. The crucifixion is just a few days away. He knows that's coming. So this is the last thing that he wants the crowds to know. There's urgency in his voice. Here's what's going on. This is John 12, starting in verse 37. Despite all the miraculous signs that Jesus had done, most of the people still did not believe in him. They saw the miracles, but they didn't believe. Now, every single one of Jesus' miracles pointed to a deeper spiritual truth, and it also pointed to the fact that he was the Messiah. That's what they couldn't see. They could see the miracles themselves, but in order to see the deeper things, the spiritual truths, and that he is the Messiah, they had to believe before they could ever see that. That's what he's getting at. This is exactly what Isaiah the prophet predicted. Lord, who has believed our message? To whom has the Lord revealed his powerful arm? That's Isaiah 53. And John keeps going, but the people couldn't believe. For as Isaiah also said, the Lord has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts so that their eyes cannot see and their hearts cannot understand and they cannot turn to me and have me heal them. That's Isaiah 6. John says Isaiah was referring to Jesus when he said that because he saw the future and he spoke of the Messiah's glory. Pause. Because doesn't that sound off? Like, why would God harden someone's heart? Like, why would God make it hard for someone to hear or see? Hard to see the truth or understand? Like, I thought he was supposed to be doing the opposite. I thought God wanted people to believe. I thought he wanted people to see the truth. I thought he wanted people to understand. So why would he do the opposite? What Isaiah is getting at is that these people already had a hard heart. That's why they couldn't hear or see. And then the more they heard the truth, the more they heard God speak, that just hardened their hearts even more. On top of that, they had really messed up expectations for what the Messiah was going to be. Just like the people did in Jesus' day, and by the way, just like we can do. It's very easy for us to have the wrong expectations about Jesus based on our own feelings, our own preferences, our own perspectives, wanting a Jesus made in our own image, or because the whole self is king mentality is sold to you every single day. So if you take wrong expectations based on personal preference, plus human thinking and reasoning, plus a hard heart, that equals unbelief every time. Even if you see something to prove to you otherwise, like Jesus' miracles. But then there's even a bigger reason. There's a bigger reason that people won't believe in Jesus. This is verse 42. Many people did believe in him. All right, cool, we're getting somewhere. Many people did believe in him, including some of the Jewish leaders, but they wouldn't admit it for fear that the Pharisees would expel them from the synagogue. Here's the key, for they loved human praise more than the praise of God. That statement's not for the faint of heart. And as much as John was talking about what was going on right then and there, the reality of what he's saying was not an isolated incident at all. Because what John is saying is very much true today. In fact, right now, this is more true in our context than maybe it ever has been before. People afraid just to admit that they love Jesus, let alone follow him. On top of that, there's this love for the praise and approval of man instead of the praise and approval of God. And those two things are very much tied together. What I mean is, what you're really afraid of is going to show you what you really love. Whatever it is that you're afraid of, if you pull back the layers of what you're afraid of, deep down you're going to see then what you really love. I mean, for them, John says right here, some of the Jews believed, some of the leaders believed, but they wouldn't admit it. Why? Because they were afraid they were going to get kicked out of the synagogue. How we would say that today is they were afraid they were going to get canceled. It's the exact same thing. If they get kicked out of the synagogue, that means they lose their religious connection in a religion-dominated culture. They lose their social connection, making them an outcast. Some of them are going to lose their livelihood, and everybody will have a hard time making it in the marketplace, which now that makes it really hard for you to provide for your family. And then most of all, if they get kicked out of the synagogue, what they're really afraid that they're going to lose is what they really love, the praise and approval of man. That's what they really loved, and they're afraid they're going to lose it. That's why they won't admit it. And the same thing is alive and well today. Today, there is such an incredible need for the praise and approval of other people. There's this huge, increasing felt need where we need to be celebrated and approved and praised and affirmed. It's almost become its own social epidemic. Now, there's a natural need for encouragement. For sure there is. And it feels great if you feel valued. It feels great if you feel affirmed. That's a good thing. But what's happened is we're taking a good thing and we're making a God thing, and we think that we have to be praised, we have to be approved, we have to be affirmed, we have to be celebrated. And if that doesn't happen, we start craving it like a narcotic, and the place where we think we can get that narcotic is from other people. So the fear of man and the love of his praise and approval means I'm afraid that I'm going to lose it if they take it away from me. And if that happens, what am I? What am I? Like maybe this is what you're wrestling with right now. Maybe you have in the past. You probably will in the future. Every single one of us will. Because nobody accidentally ends up in the spot where they love the praise of God. It doesn't accidentally happen. if you're not paying attention to what's going on with you, specifically right here and right here, then you're naturally going to drift into the spot where you love the praise and approval of other people. And it becomes a prison very quickly. So I think the obvious question then is, why? Like, why do we fear other people? Why do we fear mankind? Why do we love man's approval? And why do we love the praise instead of God's? Well, I think one, there's a fear of canceling. A fear of being kicked out of the synagogue, a fear of canceling. I don't want to do or say or believe anything that's going to get me canceled. I don't want to be ridiculed or rejected. I don't want to be kicked out of anything. I don't want somebody to tell me that I'm on the wrong side of history. Like, I don't want to be publicly or privately blasted by anyone. That sounds horrible to me, and people are just flat out mean. They can do awful things to each other. There's a fear of what other people can do to you. Like, that's real. And then from this fear of canceling comes a fear of consequences. People, they were afraid to admit that they believed in Jesus because they didn't want to get kicked out of the synagogue because they're going to lose some things. It is so easy for us to be afraid of men or women or other people. It's so easy for us to be afraid of people because of what we think we might lose. And you might lose something. You might lose something tangible. That's real. But I think there's a deeper fear of loss. Just be honest with yourself. Do you love the praise and approval of other people because other people are your source of validation? Do you look to other people for identity? Do you love the celebration and the affirmation that you're craving and you're getting that from other people? Do you love the praise and approval of men because that's your value base? Do you fear man? And when I say man, I mean all people. Again, it's just easy to say that. Do you fear man because you think your value, your validation, your affirmation, and your approval can be taken away by man? Those are huge things to put in the hands of other people. And that's exactly what you're doing if you love the praise and approval of other people. You'll always be afraid of other people because they can take that away. So if you're fearing man and you love his praise and approval, then what can happen from that is that authentic belief in Jesus becomes almost impossible. Because the glory of God is for the things that man rejects and despises. The world does not believe at all. So it becomes almost impossible to believe in Jesus if you love man's approval and praise, because Jesus runs contrary to the world and Jesus runs contrary to that narcotic. So what you'll end up doing is you'll start to undervalue Jesus. Because remember, self is king in our world, and every single day you are preached the message that you are your own God. So what you'll do is you'll undervalue Jesus and overvalue yourself and the praise of the world so that you just feel like you're good. And then from there, you'll compromise. That's the next step. Instead of universal truth, you will attach a pronoun to truth. His truth, her truth, my truth, your truth, instead of the truth. The universal truth that God has laid out for you, and it is a truth that is for you, it is not against you, but you will bail on that truth because that truth goes against the narratives of the world and doesn't reinforce self as king. So you'll compromise so that self can remain king and so that you don't make anybody else mad. And then once you compromise, the next step will be to force other people to do the same thing. And do the same thing by creating a show. Galatians 6:12 says this: those who are trying to force you to be circumcised, quick pause, we're not doing forced circumcision. It's like, not happening. Don't get nervous. This was a first century thing when this was written. Those who are trying to force you to be circumcised, that sounds awful. Here's the key. They want to look good for others. They were trying to force people to get circumcised so that they could look good for others. Why? They don't want to be persecuted for teaching that the cross of Christ alone can save. They don't want to be canceled. They don't want to be rejected. They don't want to be ridiculed. They don't want to get kicked out of anything. And they do not want to lose the praise and approval of other people. So what we'll do then is let's create this really good show that makes us look good to the people who oppose Jesus and don't believe. You and I will be so tempted to do that. to create this show, this religious show. And I'm not just talking about Sunday morning. Let's just create this facade that we're with the world. We're with you guys. We're not against you. Let's just go ahead and reinterpret Scripture. Let's just tweak the gospel and what Jesus says just a little bit, because isn't it about time? Let's create this show so that we look good and so that nobody lashes out at us. But you can't do both. You cannot follow Jesus and also create a show to look good to the surrounding world. It can't happen. It's one or the other. Paul says in Galatians 1:10, he says, I'm not trying to win the approval of people, but of God. If pleasing people were my goal, I would not be Christ's servant. So then the question is, well, who am I really trying to please? Now, I need to ask myself that more often than I would like to admit. You need to ask yourself the same thing. Who am I really trying to please? If you are trying to please all people, can I just tell you right now, this just to give you a break, you can't do it. It's impossible, especially in today's world. You cannot please all people. But if you love the praise and approval of other people, then you are going to be in a never-ending pursuit of it, and you will constantly be afraid of other people, because what happens if you don't get it then? That's a tragic way to live life. But the greatest tragedy in all of that is at some point in the end, you'll finally realize that it was all meaningless. And at that point, how much of your life did you waste? Hear me on this. If you fear man, you will have every reason to fear God. But if you fear God, you will have no reason to fear man. And when I say fear, I don't mean being terrified. Fearing God, fear of the Lord, that's not some man, let me just be scared of this guy because he's going to lay me out. No, that's not what it is at all. Fear of the Lord means respect and reverence. It means being faithful and loyal too. Not in some religious ceremonial way, but fear of the Lord means how you live your life. How you live, what you do, what you're about, your character, the things you say. Do those things reflect reverence and respect to God? Does it show loyalty and faithfulness to God? That's the fear of the Lord. And if that's you, then even though you might get canceled, even though you might get ridiculed, even though you might get kicked out of something, even though you might lose something tangible, if that's you, you don't have to fear man because you fear God. In fact, if you fear God more than you fear man, you will always be courageous in the face of opposition. Men, I want you to really hear that right now, because we need you especially to stand up. If you fear God more than you fear man, you will always be courageous when, not if, when you face opposition. Women, we need the exact same thing from you. When you fear God more than you fear man, you'll be courageous in the middle of the dark too. So to all of that, here's the last thing that Jesus says last thing he publicly teaches on. Verse 44, Jesus shouted to the crowds, if you trust me, you're trusting not only me, but also God who sent me. For when you see me, you are seeing the one who sent me. That's another way Jesus is claiming to be God right there. I have come as a light to shine in this dark world, so that all who put their trust in me will no longer remain in the dark. I will not judge those who hear me, but don't obey me, for I've come to save the world and not judge it. But all who reject me and my message will be judged on the last day of judgment by the truth I've spoken. I don't speak on my own authority. The Father who sent me has commanded me what to say and how to say it, and I know his commands lead to eternal life. So I say whatever the Father tells me to say. There's so much darkness today, is there not? I mean, you can feel it, right? It's palpable. And I think 2020 just kind of revealed it. It's always been here, but now it's just right in front of our faces. So much darkness across the world. You need to spend 5 minutes watching the news or scrolling through your reels and Instagram, and you can just see it. You can see it when you encounter people in King Supers, or when you're at the field with your kids at whatever sports team they're on. There's just so much darkness in the world right now. And the only way to see, this is a very exclusive statement, the only way to see is Jesus. That's it. So picture a maze. Let's just picture a maze, a huge maze. We're talking hundreds of square miles. This massive maze. There's only one way out of it. There's only one way out. It's full of all kinds of turns and dead ends. It's also full of dangerous booby traps. And to make it even more intense, we're going to turn off the lights. It's completely dark. You're in this maze and you got to get through it. Well, if it's dark, we're talking a maze that's hundreds of square miles and there's only one way out, and it's dark, like we're talking put your hand in front of your face and you can't see kind of dark. How are you going to get through that? I mean, the only way that you can get through that, because that would be impossible, would it not? The only way to get through that is if you can see, and the only way you can see is if you have light. You see where I'm going with this? The maze is the world. And you're in it. You're in it. Whether you want to be or not, you're absolutely in it. This maze is massive. There are all kinds of turns. There are all kinds of dead ends. There are all kinds of dangerous traps you can fall in, and it's dark. The only way you can see is Jesus, because he is the only light. And the only way to make it through is to stay right on his heels. Because not only does he know the way, he is the way. But what's crazy to me is that there's this assumption that the dark is actually safer. Like some people willingly choose to stay in the darkness because that feels like it's safer. Almost like a little kid who's really scared and they just cover up their eyes and you know what, if I can't see it, then it can't be real. That's what it looks like to stay and choose to stay in the darkness. But the danger is actually in the darkness, not in the light. The light is Jesus, and the only people that are in the light are the people that choose to not only believe in him, but aren't afraid to admit it and then follow him. So many people in this room that's them. But those people are all people who are broken too. They've got a past, got struggles, got doubts, but they believe in the one who went to the cross and then rose from the dead, and now we're taking one step at a time as we stay on his heels. But there are going to be so many attempts to keep you in the dark. So many things going on right now to keep you wandering around so that you just keep running into dead ends, so that you fall into these dangerous traps, so that you stay in the dark. And I think one of the biggest tactics right now that is aimed at keeping you in the dark is changing language. Words are powerful, are they not? So think about this. If God speaks to us, he speaks to us in his word, he speaks to us in his spirit through the church. If God speaks to us, words, if God spoke creation into existence, if Jesus is called the Word in John 1, and if the Word, scriptures, call Jesus the light, then one of the tactics of the darkness against the light is to try to change words and their meanings. This is an attempt to keep you in the dark. It's an attempt to trap you, and it's an attempt to make sin and darkness more palatable. So today it sounds something like this. Instead of lust, now we call it love. Instead of promiscuity, we call it sex positivity. Instead of ending the innocent unborn life, we call it women's health care. Instead of adultery, we call it open marriages. Instead of sexual exploitation, we call it adult entertainment. And then on the flip side, speaking the truth is now called hate speech. Or someone who doesn't conform to something is called a phobic. Or even disagreement that's compassionate, it's called bigotry. I think Hillary Morgan Ferris says this really well. She's an author. I love her definition of this. She says, linguistic theft refers to purposely hijacking words, changing their definitions, and then using the same words as tools of propaganda. Once language becomes routinely distorted, it becomes increasingly easy to justify and promote evil, while at the same time hiding behind positive words. That's exactly what's happening today. And I want you to see that. It's not only an attempt, changing words and their meaning, it's not only an attempt to make the darkness palatable, but to make the darkness attractive and celebratory. That's what's going on, and that's what Jesus is shouting to. He's saying, no, trust me. Trust what I say. If you trust me and you believe in me and you follow me, then you won't be in the darkness anymore, because without Jesus, there's nothing but darkness. So don't stay in the darkness because you're afraid of what people who are in the darkness are yelling at you. Or don't stay in the darkness because you're afraid of what you might lose in the light. Or don't shift from the light back into the darkness because you're compromising what can't be compromised, or because you're afraid to stand out. If you call yourself a Christian, let me ask you a question. How can we blend in when we're called to stand out? You're called to stand out if you believe in Jesus. Light stands out from darkness. It's supposed to. If you believe in Jesus and follow him, you're gonna stand out. You're gonna take some shots too. It's gonna happen. But 2 Corinthians 4:17 says, this light momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. Meaning, whatever it is that you might be afraid of from other people is momentary at best. And what you have in Jesus is not only eternal, but it cannot even be compared. And then on top of that, I think if you stand out, you actually might break the ice. I mean, if you have the courage not only to believe, but to follow Jesus today, man, you might be afraid of what you might lose from that or what might happen to you. That's real. But you won't be standing alone. In fact, I think you're gonna be surprised by how many people are actually standing with you. But if you're afraid, if you love the approval and praise of man, are you just afraid that you're gonna get kicked out of something or being canceled? Are you afraid you're gonna lose something? Are you gonna lose your validation, your value, your celebration, your approval, your identity? I think so many people that go along with the narratives of the world today and who choose to willingly stay in the darkness, I don't even know that all of them agree with or even believe what they're going along with deep down, but they're much more afraid of being canceled or losing approval, losing celebration, losing affirmation. That's scary. And I think this is just my opinion, so there's no way to quantify this, so you can just take it for what it's worth. I think the number of people who actually do believe the narratives and the agendas in our world today, the people who love the darkness and want to stay in it, want to bring as many people into it as they can, I actually believe that number is much smaller than you might think. There's just a lot of people that go along with it because they're afraid. You could break the ice though. We as a church, we could break that ice. You could be the catalyst for somebody else because they could see you and say, look, man, I see him, I see her. I believe the same thing. I believe in Jesus too, but they're admitting it and they're courageously following. Maybe I don't have to live in fear of man anymore, but I can actually live a life that seeks the glory of God. And then your courage just starts to spread to other people. Now, courage doesn't mean you don't have any fear. Courage is all about what you do with the fear that you have. Do you stand up and stand out, or do you blend in? You could actually be the catalyst that breaks forth, because right now, I think it is time for Christians to stand out, because this dark world desperately needs the light. And who are we to deny the light to the dark world that needs it because we're afraid of what might happen to us? Because we're afraid of getting canceled or rejected or ridiculed or kicked out of something, or because we love the praise and approval of man more than we love the praise and approval of God. Verse 50 is the last thing that Jesus teaches publicly in John. And he says, I know that his commandments, meaning God the Father, I know his commandments lead to eternal life. So I say whatever the Father tells me to say. That's why it is loving for us to say everything that God says and hold on to it, no matter if it's considered unpopular or if somebody yells at you and says that's not inclusive, or somebody says that's hateful. It's loving for us to say everything that God says and hold on to what he says, because those things lead to eternal life. And if that's true, how hateful do we have to be to not say everything that God says just because it's unpopular? We can't do that. And if you care about other people, you can't do that. Don't be afraid of man. And don't base your validation or your identity or your affirmation or your value on that. Do you know why? All of those things are gonna go away. If your validation and identity and celebratoriness and affirmation comes from man, it's gonna go away. You know how I know that? Because all people are gonna go away. Last time I checked, the mortality rate is 100%. Now, Christians should be the most encouraging people in the world. We should be over the top with how we authentically encourage each other and other people, specifically. But if everything's based on what other people say about you or what they think about you, you'll never live in anything but fear. You'll live in a prison. And you won't be who Jesus has called you to be. We're called to stand out. We're called to be bold and be courageous, but not obnoxious jerks. Jesus also said that God tells me what to say and how to say it. It's one thing to be bold with the truth, but it's another thing to say it graciously and compassionately. We don't get to be obnoxious jerks, and we don't get to be passive cowards either. Jesus was neither one. So the three things that should be very true of us: love, truth, and humility. We can't bail on any of those three. So yes, speak with confidence, but speak with compassion. Yes, be convicted and courageous, but be kind. Yes, speak the truth, but do it with so much grace. Yes, hold on to love, do it with humility. I heard somebody say this once, that humble orthodoxy is speaking the truth with a tear in your eye. If you're not weeping for the people that you're trying to be an example for and break the ice for and tell the truth to and show grace to, if you're not broken for them first, be careful with what you say. We will be held accountable for everything that we do say and everything that we don't say. But all you have to do is step into the light and stay on his heels. Follow him, not your own preferences, not you being your own God, not what the world says, not whatever new agenda or movement there is. And I'm gonna follow the real Jesus, not one created in my own image, but the word that's become flesh. So it's time to stand out and stand out for the right reasons. Let me pray. Jesus, thank you for modeling this for us. That you spoke the truth graciously with love and that you modeled it. That you've called people to the light and that you are the light. I pray that we would just be so convicted and encouraged and there would be a new hunger for you, for everybody in this room, everybody joining us online. I pray that every individual person in this room, that every husband would be a light for their kids and their wife. Every wife would be a light to their husband and their kids. Every person in here would be a light to their friends and to their coworkers, to their neighbors, their teammates, to their circles of influence, because man, we just need it right now. Would you give us conviction for that and courage for that, but also give us grace and compassion and humility. That we would be not only a light to our families and our circles of influence, but you would use our church to be a light to Northern Colorado. Use us, we're here. Convict us when we shift back into loving the approval and praise of other people, because it's so easy for me to do. I don't know about anybody else in here. It's so easy for me to get into that game. Would you gently convict us of that? Will you just give us a new hunger and love for your praise and your approval? Use us, we're your servants. In Jesus' name, amen.